The Acolyte Episode 4 entitled Day has a brand new controversy, and since this one is strictly lore based, I wanted to fill you guys in on exactly what people are upset about, how people are defending this, and exactly how this fits into the lore. So greetings Acolytes of the Force, and welcome back, as today we'll be unpacking the controversy of Ki-Adi-Mundi, and not specifically how Ki-Adi-Mundi was an absolutely terrible Jedi in Legends continuity, that struggled a great deal with his attachment of those around him, and struggled to even care for those around him, but rather, the character of Ki-Adi-Mundi has been changed entirely for Star Wars canon, as the character himself, appearing in the credits as Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, has now appeared in The Acolyte, roughly 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. So why exactly is this such a big deal? Why are people against this, and why are some defending it? Well, let's break it all down here. Acolytes, welcome back to the archives. Ki-Adi-Mundi was a famous Jedi Master that sat upon the Jedi Council during the era of the Phantom Menace. This is important because the Acolyte takes place roughly 100 years before these events, meaning that Ki-Adi-Mundi naturally would be a very long-lived species. However, this isn't entirely true. Mundi is from the species known as the Sarians, which in Legends continuity had an extremely low birth rate. In fact, the species of the Sarians typically have a lifespan of 50 to 60 years, meaning it's quite literally impossible for Ki-Adi-Mundi, if we're going by the Legends timeline, to appear in the Acolyte and the Phantom Menace. Canon of course has now changed this, making the Sarians' lifespan much longer, or perhaps it has something to do with the light side of the Force and prolonging one's life unnaturally. Nonetheless, Ki-Adi-Mundi, since he is a master at the time of the Acolyte, can conceivably now be hundreds of years old. And while this alteration to canon isn't exactly lore-breaking, it is utterly confusing, because why would they select someone like Ki-Adi-Mundi, someone who they know has a great role in the Phantom Menace as someone who believes the Sith's return to be impossible, and that the Sith have been extinct for 1,000 years, be present here, especially when there were far better options, individuals like Oppo Rancisis, or even Plo Koon. These are members of the Jedi High Council that would have worked very well for a cameo in the Acolyte, as they have very long-lived species and are conceivably around and alive during the events of the Acolyte, again 100 years before the Phantom Menace. So it's utterly dumbfounding why the Acolyte creators would select Ki-Adi-Mundi and decide to needlessly break the lore. Even if it isn't a massive lore change, it is a confusing one. But there is an aspect of this that I would like to defend briefly. Much of the discourse around this is that Ki-Adi-Mundi is the one that raises the fact in the Phantom Menace that the Sith have not been seen for 1,000 years. On the surface, this is very confusing, as the Acolyte is a Sith-centric story, and Ki-Adi-Mundi, Master Ki-Adi-Mundi, is involved in the council meeting, not the High Council, discussing the training of the dark side Acolyte in May, therefore leaving many confused as to exactly why Ki-Adi-Mundi would believe that the Sith had been extinct if he had had direct interactions with them around 100 years before the events of the Phantom Menace. But with this, we need far more clarification, as it's not quite as confusing once we take a deeper look. In the Acolyte, Vernesta, Sol, and Ki-Adi-Mundi are all speaking about May and her training. However, they never directly mention the Sith, rather just the dark side, and it is Vernesta who believes that May was trained in the Jedi arts. Ki-Adi-Mundi and others mention that this could be a splinter group, and while on the surface it may appear as if they are speaking directly about the Sith, in actuality they are referencing a splinter group of the Jedi Order. The Sith at this point in time have been extinct for hundreds of years, and these Jedi have not encountered the Sith in their entire lifespan. Therefore, when they talk about a splinter group, they're not talking about a splinter group of the Sith, rather a dark side splinter group of the Jedi, something that was extremely common in Legends continuity and even in canon. It's a common misconception that the Jedi did not have force-wielding threats around this era, and while it's true that the Sith did not make any public appearances as they were in hiding, Dark Jedi very much did. The truth of the matter is, they know that May is trained in the dark side of the Force, but the Sith are far from the only order in the galaxy that wield the dark side. Therefore, the conversation is more around a rogue Jedi that is now training dark side acolytes than specifically the Sith. So I do believe some criticism is unwarranted. However, it is absolutely perplexing to me why they would select Ki-Adi-Mundi and distinguish him as a Jedi Master in the time period of the Acolyte, seemingly for no reason. Previously, a lot of people were praising the Acolyte for having brand new characters and not being bogged down and filled with cameos. That's why when Ki-Adi-Mundi appears, it not only comes off as forced, but unfortunately very pointless as well. Thus far, there's no real reason to introduce Ki-Adi-Mundi in this story besides muddling the lore. It's important to note that there has never been a confirmed lifespan in canon continuity for Ki-Adi-Mundi's species, so conceivably it can make sense. However, it's quite frustrating because this just appears to be change for the sake of change. Other creatives in the past at Lucasfilm have said that they have drawn heavily upon Legends continuity, but the Acolyte appears to be throwing away large pieces of Legends lore just for the sake of not wanting to follow that storyline and to pave its own path. Something that I can understand. But when you're changing something just to change something, maybe even for the sake of conversation, I do not believe that this is a good idea at all, especially when the series itself is already divided. Not only this, but it's a very easy mistake to make. Connecting Mundi's comments in The Acolyte about these dark side adepts and his comments about the Sith in the Phantom Menace, it's extremely understandable how this would confuse the audience. And again, the reason this is so frustrating is it appears as if The Acolyte is confusing the audience simply for the fact that they want to, not because it adds any greater lore or makes the characters more interesting or complex. The severity of exactly what's going on should not be understated though. 2 Jedi Masters are dead, and it's clear that the Jedi know that the one that killed them is a dark side adept. It's very clear that the Jedi should be far more suspicious of May and exactly who trained her than they are. Simply believing that this is a rogue Jedi or a Jedi splinter group is naive. Of course, the Jedi of this era are naive, but for Ki-Adi-Mundi to be like this for nearly 100 years after is still concerning. The Sith are clearly growing in power, and it makes no sense why the Jedi would disregard the Sith so quickly. In terms of new lore additions, this is nothing groundbreaking. We simply know that Ki-Adi-Mundi is much older than we all initially anticipated, and it's clear that his story has had some major divergences from Legends continuity. Not that there's an issue with that inherently, but it's all about execution, and this was executed extremely poorly. But anyway, my friends, I just wanted to get my quick thoughts out there, deciding to clear the air from a lore perspective and analyze some of the legitimate critiques about Ki-Adi-Mundi appearing here as a Jedi Master, as well as explain why some are going overboard with their critique. As is this brand new lore with the Acolyte, in my opinion, being an extremely mixed bag. But anyway, my friends, what are your thoughts on this controversy? Is it something that really annoyed you? Or is this something that we as Star Wars fans need to get more accustomed to, and not grow so attached to Legends continuity and expect canon to follow it so meticulously? As always, students of the Force, subscribe to the channel for daily Star Wars holocron uploads and lore, and may the Force be with you.